Hi, and welcome back to Cardano Starter Kit number 3. My name is James. This is the fourth and final video in this starter kit, and we're going to have some fun. Now that we've looked a little bit into the history of web development, and we've set up developer environments for ourselves, we're ready to build our first app. I have two audiences in mind with this starter kit. One, if you're somebody who's brand new to development and just wondering what it's all about and what sorts of tools you might need, I'm hoping that these videos have given you a chance to build your background knowledge around what development will entail. My other audience is anybody who might not be interested in actually being a full-time developer, but who might have ideas for businesses and dApps to be built on Cardano. I'd like to provide you with this background knowledge so you know what sort of skills and sorts of people you might have to ask to be on your team. So hopefully this background really helps you dive in. And I'm really trying to make this as accessible as possible. Whenever we're learning something new, obviously it can be overwhelming to take in all the information at once, okay? So what I've tried to do is choose tools that are very popular that you might see popping up in other instructional videos across the web. In particular, I've chosen to work with React, Bootstrap, and Axios today, okay? React is a front-end web framework that helps us build web-based apps. Bootstrap helps us style and add interactivity to those apps. And Axios makes it easier to call on external data through other APIs. We're going to look at what all of this means in this video. Now, you can just see I clicked away from the main page of the starter kit, right? This is the main README file in GitHub. There's also a file here that's dedicated to the Part 4 documentation. So you can get there by clicking this link. Or if you've been following along, you can click this link right here, which goes to the same place. The first thing we'll do is open up Visual Studio Code and create a new React app. We're going to use the command line to create this app. So if either you don't have Visual Studio installed, or if you're unfamiliar with the command line, I cover both of those things in part 3 of this starter kit, so you can go take a look. I've also included some links here to documentation that you can take a look at. I do recommend both of these. The Create React App documentation is very good because it gives you context for the role of this program. I'll let you read that on your own. We're just going to use this command right now, Create React App. Notice that we're calling npx, which, to make a long story short, is part of npm. It just works a little bit more simply. We're going to use this command in just a moment. First, let's open up Visual Studio. When you open Visual Studio, you should see something that looks like this, and you should see an Add Folder button. If you don't, just click on the top right here, okay? This is our Explorer, or you can use the toolbar up here to add a folder to the workspace. Let's click on Add Folder. I've got my empty desktop here. I'm just going to make a new folder on my desktop called CSK003. You can create a folder wherever you'd like, and then you can add that folder so now we can see it in our workspace. It's empty. Now, what was that command again? Let's go back here to the documentation. Remember, developers are really good at cutting and pasting. Okay, so you can either type this command yourself, or you could just cut and paste it. Now, where are we going to put it? Let's see here. Back in Visual Studio. Remember, this is an integrated developer environment. So we've got the File Explorer here. We've got a main part of the screen where we can edit our code. And let me see, terminal. Let's open up a new terminal here at the bottom of the page where we can write our commands. Now, notice I am now in CSK003, the folder that I just created. If you open up a workspace before opening the terminal, you should see that reflected on your command line. And what I'm going to type here is npx. Similar to npm, once again, npx is a new command that just makes it a little bit simpler to install big programs. Create React app is the name of the package that I'm installing. And I want to call my app quote app. You could actually call it whatever you want. So you see over here in the documentation, I'm choosing to call it quote app. But you could actually write whatever words you want right there and then press enter. Now it's going to take a little while to install this thing, so I'm going to come back when this is done. All right, great. That took a couple of minutes on my machine. It probably did the same on yours. If you did everything right, you should see a message that says, we suggest that you begin by typing cd quote app and then npm start. That's exactly what the documentation here says, right? And it should say happy hacking. All right, let's go for it. Before we type these commands, let me just show you inside of our CSK003 folder, we have another folder called quote app that was created when we chose to write quote app instead of some other name when we ran create React app. And inside, this is what create React app installs for you. A couple of different folders, some files. It's okay if you're not sure what these files do yet. I just want you to know that all of these are here. So look, we have a bunch of different CSS files, some different JS files, SVG, that says logo, right? This is an image file. We have a package.json file that has a bunch of information in it that might look a little confusing for now. But don't worry, we're going to make sense of this as we go. So before we go any further, let's just get this app up and running to see what that's all about. Like the instructions say, I'm going to cd over to my new directory, which is called quote app because that's the title I chose. And then it says to run npm start to get our app running. This starts the local development server. And look at this web address right here, localhost:3000. Right? This is just a spot. This is being run from my computer. This looks like a web app, but it's not being served over the internet right now. And just like this, I've got an interactive icon and some text and a link up and running. Just take a moment to appreciate this compared to what I showed you in video number 2, right? App development, web app development has come a really long way. And the fact that we have this right out of the box means we can get to the creative part much faster these days than we could, 20 plus years ago. Now let's think for a moment about how this is done. Notice in the public folder right here, there is an index.html file. You can read through the comments here to learn more about how React works. But I'm going to leave that part up to you. To simplify things quite a lot, we're actually not going to touch the index.html file. React takes care of a lot of things for us without us having to touch it, okay? The file we are going to start with is app.js, okay? And so if you look, the text right here, edit src/app.js. Okay, that's the file we're looking at right now. In the source folder, the app.js file, it says save and reload. Yeah, what if we go in between these paragraph tags right here and we just write whatever we want? Welcome to CSK number 003. Now, I have to save this file to make sure it works. It's going to compile again. And look, it says once again, it's successful. If I navigate back here, I can see that I've changed the text. Now that we have our new project up and running, we can start adding to it. And to do this, we're going to use the Node Package Manager, NPM. I love NPM. Think about how easy it is to install apps on your mobile device, right? Whether you have an Android or an Apple, both of those operating systems have app stores. You can browse all the different apps, you can download them, and you can make your phone do all sorts of different things. NPM is just like the App Store, except for developers. And what it allows us to do is just search through packages of what other people have already created. So Bootstrap is an example of that. And you can read about it here. Now, some packages have their own website, like Bootstrap has this one with all the documentation here. You don't have to go via NPM. You don't actually even have to install Bootstrap the way I'm going to show you right now. There's other ways to quickly get started with it. But now that we have an app up and running, the best and probably easiest way to use it is just to install it directly to our project. So watch this. We're going to need the command line. Here in Visual Code Studio, I'm actually, we're serving our local host from this terminal window, and I don't want to stop that process. So I can click the plus button over here to open up another terminal window, and then I can either switch between them or I could just open them side by side like this. Okay, so I've got my quote app running in the browser via my local host, and then here, still in the quote app folder, I'm going to type npm install Bootstrap. What Bootstrap is, let's go back to that documentation for just a second. What Bootstrap is a front-end open source toolkit. I took this directly from the home page of Bootstrap, right? Front end, it means it's what appears in the user's web browser, right? So we're just going to be styling things and creating some interaction whenever we use Bootstrap. It is open source. This was actually developed by Twitter developers, similar to how React was developed by Facebook developers. So I know, we're still relying on Facebook and Twitter in a way via these open source projects. But the reason I chose these tools is because they are very, very popular and pretty accessible. All right, so once you get to know these, then we can start to ask the harder questions about using maybe more decentralized tools. For now, we're going to use Bootstrap just as an example. Okay, whoops, I'm swiping the wrong way. Also, before I run this command, I just want to open up package.json again so you can watch this. You see right here, we have dependencies. So far, our app depends on a few different React, what are these, scripts, libraries, okay, and a few other things that we may or may not want to understand. I know that JSON files, package.json files started making more sense to me when I started watching how they change when I install new dependencies. So watch this. When I run install Bootstrap, it's going to take a few minutes for this status bar to fill up, but I'm going to keep recording here just so you can see this. And did you see that happen? Okay. As this finished up, I got a new line in my package.json file that says, okay, this app depends upon Bootstrap. And there it is. And what this allows us to do is share our work across the web. You can share your package.json file with another developer, and they can look right here to find out what else they need to install to make the app run. Cool. So now we've got that running. The other thing we need to do is go into index.js, and we're going to have to make sure to import Bootstrap. I'm going to do this right above the index.css. And let me check my notes here. What do we have to type? Back to the documentation. We want to import, you know what? I'm just going to cut and paste this. We will add this import to the top of index.js. So again, right here. And this gives us access within our app to all of the Bootstrap styling, right? Bootstrap.css. Bootstrap also comes with a lot of JavaScript interactive features. We're actually not going to touch those in this lesson. We're only going to use a little bit of this. I just want to show you how this works, but there's a whole lot deeper you can go into using the Bootstrap libraries. Now, why did I have to import this at index.js? Let's take a look at that for a second. Notice that this index file imports the app file that we already have open right here and calls on app via this funny looking tag right here. This looks a little bit like an HTML tag, but it has a slash at the end. This is called a JSX tag. Don't worry, you don't have to remember that for now, but we are going to see more of these later. What this means is that when we place our app inside of this index file, it basically inherits all of these imports right here. So anything we've imported here affects whatever we pull in here, which is coming from here. Okay? If that made sense, great. If I should delete that part of the video, let me know that too. The point is, now we have access to our bootstrap.css. Now that we've imported Bootstrap to our index.js file, we can use it. The way we use it is with the class attribute inside of any HTML tags, right? So you're familiar with tags. Div is an example of a tag. Here's the open and here's the close. But you can see that inside of this tag, there's this class equals thing and this style equals thing. Class and style are called attributes. And attributes give us access to the Bootstrap CSS styling. For example, if we say that a div has a class equal to card, this calls on, let's go into the documentation here, into, content. Components, card, right? All of this this styling that goes with cards in Bootstrap comes from the class attribute being set to card. What we can do just to start to play with this is we can copy and paste this HTML right here, and we're going to move it over into our app.js file. Let's give this a try. So I'm actually going to delete everything that's inside of these header tags in app.js. Let's just save that for a moment to see what we have now. It still compiles. Okay, well, we have a warning. Well, let's see. If I go back to the app here and reload it, yeah, there's nothing on the page because I just deleted everything. And I have this warning that says logo is defined but never used. Right, because I just deleted it. So actually, we no longer need this import at the top of our file. And we could even delete that React logo over here in our file browser because we're not going to use it again. Fine. Let me see if I save that. That shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, good. We've compiled successfully. All right. Now, again, I copied this HTML right here, and I'm just going to paste it into my app here. So what do we have? And the tabbing is a little messed up. So let me just tab these things over so it looks a little prettier. Good. Actually, let's go one more, so we can see that this is all inside of these header tags. Okay, we have a div with class card. That div closes here. Then inside of that, let's just use a little spacing to make this easier to read. we have two more divs. We have a class header div that has some text inside of it, and we have a card body div that has some other text inside of it. If I save this and I navigate back over to my app, oh good, now I have this empty card. It also looks like the text here is white. We're going to want to fix that. Okay, right, because in our app, all text is white. And there's a few ways to fix this. Let's go into app.css. Let's look for where the color, yeah, we don't want that color to be white anymore. You know what? I'm just going to delete this line. All right, color sets the font color and the border color inside of different app components. But if I delete that line and save it and go back here, good. Now the text isn't white anymore. It's the default black text. So I have a card with a header that says Cardano Starter Kit. This is shaded a little bit, and it says this is a card. Cool. Now we're using Bootstrap. Just so you can see what happens, let's go back to index for just a moment, and temporarily we could either delete this line, but if you use a double slash, this is called commenting, right? You can see these lines down here are comments. This doesn't get compiled as code. So if I save this file now, it's as if we just deleted this line. And now if I go back to my app and I refresh, you see none of that card styling is here because the class card doesn't make sense unless we have Bootstrap inside of our app, Bootstrap CSS in our app, okay? So the only reason we're allowed to use the word card as our class is because we've imported Bootstrap in the first place. Save that again, go back over here, refresh the page, and sure enough, that styling shows up. So I wanted to walk you through that just so you could see what Bootstrap is doing for us here, okay? Now, like I said, there's a lot more that Bootstrap can do. I just wanted to expose you to this example. And now we have this pretty little card on the page. So let's keep going. Now, before we add more to the page, I want to show you what makes React really special. Everything you build in React can be separated into different components, and this makes it really easy to reuse things. Let me show you what I mean by that. We're going to go into the source directory and create a new file called quote.js. And then we're going to place the following code inside of it, okay? What we're doing is we're making a new component called quote, all right? So I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to head over, whoops, I keep doing that, in my source folder, right? If you're already in Visual Code Studio, like you have been following along, create a new file here by clicking this icon. And let's call it quote.js. And let's just drop, this is kind of the template for creating a new component in React, all right? And what are we going to do with this? What we want to do is take the code that was inside of our card. Let's do that just right away, okay? So this should look, actually, it's not. Look, I forgot the styling here, so I'm going to have to update this. I'm going to update this documentation by the time you get to it. And this gives me a chance also to mention, let's go back here, this style piece right here. This determines how wide the card is. So if you want to make a wider or narrower card, just play with this number of rems right here. Rem is just a unit of measurement on a computer page. Okay, or on a web page. Okay, so yeah, let me cut and paste it from here actually, because that'll be even more reliable. So all of that, I'm gonna remove it because I'm not gonna need it anymore. I'm going to place it here. Tabbing looks okay. And then I'm just going to save this. Okay, so all I've done is taken the code that was in app and moved it to a separate component. Cool. Now, how do I use that? Well, remember over here in index.js, we had this JSX tag that said app, and it had this slash here. We can do that with any component. Now I can type quote with the slash and close that. And now what I'm doing is I'm saying, all right, grab the component called quote, and it's going to display this. Ready? Save and, it failed to compile. Why? Quote is not defined. Well, what the heck? Yeah, I defined it here. Okay, and I'm showing you this. I'm kind of playing right now. I want to show you the reason for this. Remember that when I used app here, I had to import app. And I have to do the same thing if I want to use my quote component in any other file, like this one, for example. So the way I do that is I type now import quote from where? This dot means just the current folder. So you notice how quote and app are in the same directory folder, src. So I can say the same folder from a file called quote. I can type JS, but React actually allows me to leave that off, because if I don't write an extension, it just assumes I'm asking about a .js file. CSS, I had to include that, right? Because it's not JSS. Now that I've imported quote, I should be able to save the file and good, it compiled successfully. Now if I go back to the page over here, I'm actually not going to see, I'm not going to see any difference, right? I didn't change anything about the content. All I did was under the hood, changed the way my app is organized. And if you have lots of different components, what you usually end up doing is creating a series of different folders inside of SRC so that you can have maybe your toolbars in this folder and your blog posts in that folder, and et cetera, all the different parts of a web page, all the different components that are going to be reused across your app. You can organize those basically however you'd like. Now, why would we do this? Well, for one thing, now we can just focus on this quote component, and we are going to make more changes to this in just a moment. Another reason to do it is that now, instead of repeating this code if I want to make multiple cards, now watch this. I can just make another quote tag. You know what? Let's go crazy. Let's just make a bunch of them. Okay. Hey, listen, let me just copy those 3 more times and put them here. Okay, let's save that file. It still compiles perfectly. Let's go back and look. Wow, I just made 6 copies of that card without basically doing any additional work. Okay, it's so easy. And if I wanted to have this little quote component on other pages in my site, I can basically use it anywhere now. Now, we're just building a one-page app right now, but imagine if you have a full-blown site with all sorts of different sections to it, and anywhere on the site you just want people to look up crypto quotes. You're going to be able to do that after the end of this video. Awesome. Okay, so now everything we do the rest of the way is just going to be inside of this quote component, where we're going to build a form to take user input, and then we're going to make a call to an API to do something with that input and put a crypto quote right on the screen. So now we're ready to make our little card interactive. What we want the user to be able to do is type the symbol of any cryptocurrency and then get the name and current price of that token. So let's do it. Now, I know we're doing a lot of cutting and pasting today. This is a thing that developers do, as I mentioned earlier in this starter kit. And if we were really taking our time here, I would maybe be a little bit more proactive about asking you to type these things in, right? Our brains definitely remember more when we type things. We notice the details better when we type things. But if I did all of that, this video would turn into a much longer thing, okay? And I'm trying to, within an efficient amount of time, just show you the basics and get you started. So we're going to keep cutting and pasting, but just keep in mind that if you start your own course of study using some other tutorials or online courses, I want to say that we're making bad habits right now by doing all this cutting and pasting. Okay, but we are saving time, so let's keep going. Okay, I want to replace in quote.js just the language that says this is a card with this HTML right here. So let's do it. Copy that, head back over to my quote.js file. Yeah, I'm going to keep the header. That's fine. By the way, if you want to change the name of your app, you can change that to whatever you want, right? I'm just calling it Cardano Starter Kit. But of course, you can customize that. Cool. And let's just move all of this over like we've been doing. And we'll move that over too. Good. So now I can see that inside the card body, we have a form. Inside the form, we have a form group that has some input in it. And then we have a submit button. Now, to save time, I just gave you this code to cut and paste. And actually, when I save this, I'm going to get some errors. What are the errors? Handle submit from line 12 is not defined. So line 12, yeah, we have handle submit right here. Line 18, symbol is not defined. And on line 19, set symbol is not defined. Okay. If you want to, you can get rid of these calls here and just see what the blank form looks like. To save time, I'm going to skip that step too. Let's just define these things so that we can start to use them. Handle submit is a function that runs whenever somebody presses the submit button. Symbol is a variable that's going to hold whatever the user types in. And set symbol is actually a built-in little function that changes the value of symbol. Okay, so every time the text inside of this input box changes, right, on change, when the user types something and the text changes, we're going to take that event, that's what this E is for, and we're going to set the symbol. We're going to set, this variable to whatever's there. All right. Now there's a lot more going on here. Okay. And so what I'm doing is showing you what the code looks like. It'll take a couple of days of studying JavaScript to really understand user interaction. All right. I want this to be your first foray into seeing this. And then if you choose to go further down the development path, you'll be able to do that. Let's go back to the documentation. Okay. And so just again, to talk about what we've got here, input and submit, these are built into HTML. Okay. There's input tags, and then there's type attributes. All right. We're going to write some JavaScript now to handle user interaction with the form. And for that, we're going to have to use something called React hooks. One of the themes of this starter kit has been that over the years, web development has gotten easier and more accessible because we're always building on the work of all the developers that came before us. React hooks are an example of this. Hooks are relatively new. I think they were first released in 2018 or so. You can fact check me on that. What they do is they make interaction a bit easier for developers, when developers want to add interaction to their apps, hooks make that a little bit easier. Now, I'm not going to give you the whole history right now, but I want you to know that when hooks first came out, it was kind of hard to get our minds around that because we had to unlearn certain things. You don't have to worry about that. You just get to use these now. And what I'm hoping is that this makes some sense. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to import the hooks called useState and useEffect at the top of our quote.js file. And then we're going to call on those functions. UseEffect, we're going to use that in a little while when we call on an API. So first we're going to call on useState. What useState does is it sets an initial value for a symbol, and it couples that with some function that's used to update the value of that variable right there. Okay, so these go together. Symbol and set symbol. Lookup is a variable. Set lookup changes the value of it. Okay, right here you can see that set lookup is called whenever we handle submit. So whenever the user presses the submit button, the lookup is going to be set to the value of symbol. This is going to make more sense in just a moment after we watch this in practice. First of all, let's grab useState and useEffect. Let's pull those into our import up here. So React, comma. These curly brackets just allow us to pick and choose the parts of React that we need. Okay, so we're going to use useState and useEffect. They're actually, you see how they're a little dull right here? That just lets us know that we haven't used them yet. And then we're also going to grab this code right here. If you really want to practice, you can type this yourself. Just to save time, I'm choosing to cut and paste it right now. This goes at the top of our quote function, above the return. So let's copy this. Head back here again. Above the return statement, let's just go right here. Whoops. Uh-oh, what happened? Let me try that again. Whoa, gosh, sorry. Let's make sure. Oh, look, I didn't copy the right thing. Sorry. Copy that instead. Try again. That's better. All right. So what this does again for us is we set up a variable called symbol and a way to reset it. The initial value of symbol is 2 quotation marks with nothing in between. This is called an empty string. The symbol and the lookup are going to be a string of characters, a word or a symbol, right? But for now, they're not going to say anything. Every time we call set symbol or set lookup, then the values of these variables is going to change. All right. When is it going to change? Well, lookup is going to change whenever the user presses submit, right? So down here we have this on submit, handle submit. What's handle submit? Well, it used to be undefined. Remember that error right here? But now we just defined it. Handle submit is a function that takes an event and it changes the value of lookup to whatever is in the symbol. Where is symbol coming from? That's what's inside of the input field in the little form we're building. And every time the user types, every time the user changes what's in that input box, symbol is going to change to reflect that. So 2 things we're going to do right now. First, if I press save, I still have warnings, but at least I have no more errors. UseEffect is defined but never used. Right, that's because I put it here but haven't used it yet. That's okay with me. Lookup is assigned a value here but never used. Actually, that's okay too. We're going to use it in just a minute. Now, if I go back to my form, this is the first time we should be able to see, a blank little form. It just doesn't do much yet. I can type in it. I can submit in it. All right, but nothing else seems to be happening. So let's now use these variables that we've created. What are the names of those variables? Symbol and lookup. Watch this. Over here, inside my card body, maybe above the form, let's just put some paragraph tags, and then let's type the value of symbol here. Now I'm using curly brackets because I'm writing inside of some HTML right now, but symbol is actually JavaScript. It's a JavaScript variable, right? So I use curly brackets. We use the word inject to inject some JavaScript. You can see the same thing happening here and here, right? We're just injecting a little bit of JavaScript into the HTML. Let's save this. Still works. And now let's see what shows up when we start typing here. So I want to look up the value of eta. Look, it shows up there as well. That's kind of weird. Weird spacing issues are happening here, but at least it looks like the functionality is working. But actually, I don't like this because I don't want the symbol to show up while I'm typing. I don't want it to show up until I've actually pressed submit. Well, remember, go back to our code. What changes when we press submit? The lookup is going to change. Look at the difference here. What if I change the word symbol to lookup? Okay. First of all, one less warning, right? Because now I'm using this lookup right here. And second of all, more importantly, now when I type eta, it doesn't change automatically, but when I press submit, there we go. Now I am taking user input, and then I'm using that user input to update the page. Okay. Cool. Seems to be working. Now there's a problem here. This can take any text that I type in, as you can see, not just crypto symbols. But that's a challenge for you at the end of this lesson, okay, to kind of fix that behavior. Cool. We're in good shape. Let's go back to our to-do list here in the documentation. Hopefully what I just showed you helps you see the difference between symbol and lookup. Symbol is always changing whenever the user types anything. Lookup only changes when the user presses submit. So that's what we're going to use. Now that we're able to take user input, now we can do something really fun, and we can make our first API call. That's in the next section. All right, if you're still here, you're doing great, and I'm really proud of you. This is the fun part. All right, in the first part of this starter kit, I described the relationship between HTTP protocol, which transmits information and data, and blockchain protocols that transmit trust. Now, for those to talk to each other, we're going to have to set up some APIs. And here at Gimbalabs, we have a lot of ideas for kind of how to help you do this, make it more accessible. Okay. Now, in order to understand APIs, this is one of those phrases I know that kind of distinguishes developers from everybody else, right? Once you understand what an API is, just like understanding NPM, it just opens up a whole new field of possibilities to you. So let's try this today. Let's see how this goes. And please, 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 please follow up with questions, okay? If something I show you here doesn't make sense, or you want to know how to generalize what I'm showing you here to other applications, let's talk, okay? Jumping right in, application programming interfaces, or APIs, simply allow us to send and receive data between different apps, different parties, different databases. All of the different information out there on the web can interact via APIs. Some are open and free and others are not, okay? So today we're going to use Messari's free API. They actually have a paid one too that has a little bit more functionality, okay? Twitter has a free API, but you have to apply for a developer account before you can use it. So I was thinking about using Twitter for this starter kit, but I didn't want you to have to wait to get approved to be a developer there and go through all that. So I want to use something free and open. That's why we're using Messari today. Cardano requires a little bit more setting up, like we noted right here. And that's one of the things we're working on here at Gimbalabs, is making it easier for you to get set up and ready, right? To build into your environment the ability to use Cardano APIs to get information from, and someday soon to interact with the blockchain. So this is where we're going, but let's get started by just playing around with Messari. Now, you can call an API without installing additional dependencies. But just because I want you to get in the habit of seeing what it means to use NPM and install different tools, right? Let's just use Axios. And Axios does save us a little time when we get down here and start adding this code. So let's head back into our developer environment. Let's go over here. We've got our server running right here. And then we've got another terminal window. I'm just going to clear this so it's easier to see. I just typed the word clear to do that. And then let's type npm install Axios. Okay. Pop quiz. Where can I look to make sure this worked? Wait for it. If this worked, you're exactly right. I should be able to see it in my package.json. And sure enough, there it is. Okay, so now I've added Axios and Bootstrap to all of the stuff that typically comes with a React app. Nice. The other thing I need to do is, now that I've installed that package, I have to import it. Where do I import it? Well, I import it only to the components where I need it. So in this case, I'm only going to use Axios on my quote components. I'm not going to put this at index.js where it's going to be available to everything, or even at app.js, even though that would work. I only need Axios in my quote component, so that's where I'm going to put this. Let me just make sure I remember to copy that. Yep, there we go. And let's put it up here, import Axios, and we should be good to go. So far, we have two use state hooks set up. One that holds the value of the symbol as the user types it in, and the other that holds the value of the symbol after the user presses submit. We're going to use two more hooks to hold on to the data that the API returns to our quote component. Once again, you can just copy and paste these right here. Okay, so we're going to get the name of some cryptocurrency and its price. Notice the initial states here are different. The name is a string, so once again, we're going to use those empty quotes. But price needs to be a number, so we just set the initial state to 0. And that way, the program knows kind of the data type of each of these variables, name and price. So I copied that, head back here, just fix our tabbing. So now we have a total of 4 hooks: symbol, lookup, name, and price, and ways to reset each of them. Now, just to understand what we're looking at, let's go look at the Messari API. What do we see when we go exploring here? Okay, so we have a little page here that shows us some basics, some different ways maybe to interact with it. And this right here, this is actually what an API looks like. Whoa, what'd I do? Sorry. All right, let's start over again. This is what an API looks like, right? if you're looking closely, you might notice that this looks a little bit like that package.json file that we were looking at before, right? This is all JavaScript object notation. Okay, that's what JSON stands for. We have JavaScript objects right here. Just like protocols tell us the rules of engagement, right? So that over the HTTP protocol, we've set the rules for how data is transferred. APIs kind of adhere to this protocol of using JSON to pass information. And this makes it much easier for systems to talk to each other because there is this standardized way of sharing data. Let's read the documentation a little bit. Can never hurt to jump in and take a look. You can read all of this. What I've done in this starter kit right here is I'm just giving you the example that relies on some of this stuff, okay? But let's go see if we can look at the code and find, whoops, I need to go back to the documentation. Let's see if we can find some of this stuff. So what am I calling on? I'm calling on the data.messari.io API. I'm looking for an asset, and I'm looking for some metrics, including the market data. Let's see if we can find that. Assets, metrics, market data. Looks like I'm in assets right here. Notice down here it says asset metrics. And is one of those going to be market data? Look at this right here. Check it out. Here it is, market data. And when I look into that data, so again, data, market data, I can see the price in US dollars. I can see the price in Bitcoin. I can see volume data. And I can actually call on any of these. I can see historical data, right? You can call on any of these. Now, all I want is the name and the current price in US dollars of whatever we look up. Of course, you can go ahead and include anything else you want. In fact, that's one of the extension exercises in this starter kit is to keep going, okay? But if I read through this documentation, I find the information I need, then I can call on it. What does it look like to call on it? This is what it looks like. So let's go through this just a little bit. We're going to use that use effect hook. Use effect does something when something else in the app changes. That's what this last parameter is right here. Basically, by putting lookup in brackets at the end, this tells this use effect hook to fire every time the lookup changes. When does the lookup change? Oh, the lookup changes every time the user presses the submit button, and whatever they were typing into that symbol field becomes the new value for lookup, right? So whenever we get a new value for lookup, then we are going to look it up here. What are we going to look up? We're going to look up whatever that variable says. So this string right here actually goes to a certain URL related to a certain cryptocurrency. Let me show you this a different way. What if I go up here and I cut and paste that web address, but let's get rid of that quote mark here and the word lookup because that's a variable, and let's just type ADA right there. Press enter. This passes me just some messy data. It's not even pretty, right? This is just being shot across the internet to tell me this data about ADA from this URL. And if I changed it to ETH, I would get a similar, right? The structure of this data is the same. In this case, the information is about Ethereum. There's the symbol, there's the name, slug, price, market data, etc. And so I could change this URL to whatever I want, BTC. But if I type the name of a coin that doesn't exist, like, I don't know, well, there could be anything right now. Does quadruple Z exist? No, you see it says not found. So if I search for a coin that doesn't exist, I still get a response, but it just tells me, oh, we couldn't find that one. Okay. So this URL is going to be customized to whatever the user is asking for. And then it's going to call on these hooks that I shouldn't say call on. It's going to provide those responses from the Messari API, and it's going to set the name to data.name and the price to data.marketdata.price. And then it's going to return that. This is called an async function. Async is for asynchronous, right? Because we don't know how long it's going to take for this to run. So the page is going to load. All the functions that are going to run. But because we're kind of waiting for this, we're at the mercy of this other server. We just have to call it async so we don't get some errors as the page is waiting for it. Okay. And in the use effect hook, we basically create this async function and then we call it. Now, I just took a few minutes to try my best to explain this in a simple way, but there's no chance that I've done this justice. Okay, so I encourage you, if you want to learn more about this, if you really want to understand it, go search for, if you search like YouTube, for example, for videos about React and Axios, or you can type React hooks and Axios. There's some great resources out there from some people who can help you go deeper into this. All right. Again, I'm trying to provide you a survey of what's available here, and I bet this video is just about an hour long now, and I'm trying to sneak it in under an hour. So let's see if we can get that done. Once again, I'm just going to cut and paste this to get it working. Where did it say to put that? Below handle submit and above return. So below handle submit, outside of that function, and above return, let's just place that use effect. And yeah, the brackets close. Good, we're looking good. Let's save that just to make sure it compiles. Okay. We have two new warnings. Now we're using use effects, so we don't get a warning about that anymore, but we do get a warning that says name is assigned but never used, price is assigned but never used. You know what? Let's use them. Let's make two more paragraphs here. And let's type the name. Whoops, and the price. And now if I compile this again, it's successful. There's not even any warnings. Let's go see what we have on the page. So over here, back to our app, Meta Cartel Ventures. That sounds suspicious. I'm not sure what's going on there, but let's see what happens if I type a symbol. Ah, cool. Okay, that worked. I now see the lookup symbol here. I see the name of it here. This was returned by the Messari API. And I see the US dollar price of Cardano right now here. And if I type BTC, that works too. And if I type ETH, that works too. Cool. So this is not very user friendly. There's kind of this weird, oh, it was a 0. Look at that. It's just changing on me. That's what happens when you run an async function, right? So I saw the number 0 there for a moment. I see Meta Cartel Ventures here. I can tell that my app is working, but maybe I can make it look just a little bit better. So let's do that next. All right, we're almost done. There's one more thing that we ought to do, because once again, I don't want to have to look at Meta Cartel Ventures. That's just confusing here. I want the user to have a better experience. And this is a big part of development. Once you take that data, Doing the simple part, like saying, hey, I want to put a quote on the page, that's actually fairly straightforward, right? Making the case that's supposed to happen. Developers spend a lot of time on what are called edge cases. On the edge, at the beginning, at the end, when an error happens, how does the app behave in those scenarios? I want to handle just a little bit of that now. All right. We're leaving a lot undone here. This app is not ready for the mainstream yet, but it is helping us get an idea of what to build. So the last thing we're going to do today is just add a little helper function such that when we don't yet have a lookup, right? When lookup is blank, we want to return this. And I kind of used a double negative here, right? So this says if lookup is not blank, then return the name and the price of the coin that we just looked up. Otherwise, right, else, which means if it is blank, then let's just have some initial text here on the screen, okay? If lookup is not empty, show us the data. If it is an empty string, tell us that you can look up a coin and we're awaiting your input. This goes above the return function. All right. So maybe you're starting to recognize now that inside of our functional component called quote, right? First thing we did is we set up these hooks. We have some helper functions, handle submit, use effect. And now we're also going to put coin info here. All right. And coin info returns what's called a React fragment. Without going too deep into this, fragments just make it possible to inject little bits of code into the rest of the code that we're writing down here. Okay. So let's actually just replace all three of these lines with curly brackets that tell us, again, we're injecting a little bit of JavaScript. What are we injecting? Coin info right here. I can even copy and paste that. All right, whatever coin info says, that's what we're going to put right here. And now that we've done this, save the file. Oops, it failed to compile. Why? Look what it says. Fragment is not defined. And I did this on purpose just to show you some of the things that can go wrong. I'm using fragment, but actually if I want to use that, I have to pull it in from React, just like I pulled in my two hooks here. Okay, fragment. It doesn't load by default as part of the default React library. I have to choose to use it. Now that I have it there, let's do this. Compiled successfully. Excellent. Let's go take a look. I think this is it. Let's refresh the page. Name, look up a coin. Price, awaiting your input. That's exactly what we told it to say right here in our helper function called coin info, right? Because at the moment, lookup is blank, so it's returning this right here. Once we submit a symbol, ADA, it shows up on the screen. Cool. Now, that was still kind of ugly. Did you see what happened there? I typed ADA, I pressed submit, and you see how for a split second those words Metacartel Ventures showed up on the screen? We're going to want to fix that. But this video is already getting long, so I'm going to leave that to you. Okay, so we have a working app. Nice job. What did we not do today? Well, we didn't handle all of the use cases. You know, that app would probably be a lot. Let me say this a different way. We could improve the user experience even more if we built that app in such a way that maybe there was a little bit of like a loading screen or a spinner, right? You know how oftentimes when you have apps loading data, maybe a little GIF of a spinning icon shows up. Well, you could add that, right? Where this comes from is whenever you're calling on outside data, that's why you include things like that. So maybe we can include that in a future starter kit. This thing is not that pretty, right? I don't think I have $1 million app right here quite yet. So let's see, what can you do for extensions? Maybe you can style it. Okay, so if you go to the Bootstrap docs, read about the different ways to style this app. You could make it look prettier. You could change the color of the button. Maybe you want to change the fonts. So like we covered in part 2 of this starter kit, you could pull in some custom fonts. You could also review the Messari API and call on some other information. Okay, so we're only calling on the name and the market data in USD of that coin. But you could pull in any of this data. Okay, so that's a really nice extension here to try to figure out how to do that. You know what bothers me as well? This price is supposed to be in US dollars, but we didn't format it. Maybe you could try to format that, and maybe you could learn in JavaScript how to round this off. I also have a few challenge exercises here. Okay, so one thing we did not do is we didn't deploy this app. All right, actually, if I go to Gimbalabs.com, this is a work in progress, but I did put this app up here. So this is live and deployed, and this works. Okay, obviously, I still haven't fixed some of the things I was just talking about. Maybe I'll do that over the next few days. All right, but I want you to see this right here. It is deployed to a live web address, so you can take a look at that and show it to other people. But how would you host your own? I covered GitHub pages in part 2 of this starter kit, but deploying a React app is a bit more complicated. I am going to cover that in a future starter kit, but I'm wondering if you want to take it on as a challenge to beat me to it. And if I get some feedback that says, hey, just put that up, help us out. If anybody tells me, hey, add that to the starter kit, I'll be happy to do it. All right. I just want to leave it here for you as a challenge for now. Finally, let's see, add some logic. So if a user inputs a symbol that doesn't exist, your app returns an error message. How does this thing work right now? Let's see if I load this up again. Actually, let me just go back to the local host again. So if I type something like goo, I just get Metacartel Ventures again and a blank price. Yeah, it would be better if this app said to me, oh, that coin does not exist, or gave me some kind of error message. That's a really good challenge for you, okay? So if you've been following along, if you feel like you understand so far what I've showed you and want to test your skills, try to figure out how to get this part to work. That's the end of this video. Let's go back to the home screen of this starter kit documentation. Because we're closing out. This is the very end of this starter kit number 3. I'm really excited to add revisions to this documentation, to redo this video if there's parts of it that don't make sense. And the only way I know what to change is by getting feedback from you. So do be sure to join us on Discord to continue the conversation. Ask questions that this raised. Tell us what you want us to build next, or what you want to build alongside of us. And if there's anything in this video that's just nonsense and doesn't work for you, you can let me know that there too, okay? If you want to go much deeper on your journey, another direction I just want to point you is over to Reach. Reach is a dApp programming language. It's not yet compatible with Cardano, but rumor has it that maybe it will be someday. That's kind of irrelevant though, because even if this Reach language was never made compatible with Cardano, this is a really, really good tutorial nonetheless. It requires you to use the command line and use some new tech skills that you might be developing right now. And as you work through it, right, here's the tutorial, self-study projects, project-based learning. I love these people. Okay. As you work through these tutorial projects, you'll just have better and better insight into the sort of things you need to think about as you're building a dApp. Okay, so all of us are in this together. There's a lot to learn. This is another great place to learn more about what makes a dApp. Hey, if you made it to the end of this video, thanks a lot for sticking around. I had fun making this. I hope that it was helpful. And once again, hope to see you soon. Thanks for your time.